2020, and call upon Councilmember John Marriott for a moment of reflection in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Thank you, Your Honor. Would you please join me in a moment of silent reflection? And now, the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and for the republic, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Next, I'll call on Kristen Rush for a roll call.
Mayor Williams.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Marriott. I'm sorry, wrong one.
You've been demoted, Ms. Miller. You didn't know it.
Mayor Pro Tem Miller.
Here.
Councilmember Pfeiffer.
Here.
Councilmember Ford.
Here.
Councilmember Jones.
Here.
Councilmember Marriott.
Here.
Councilmember Simpson.
Here.
Next, we have the approval of the minutes of March 2nd, March 12th, and March 23rd of 2020. We're using a raise hands feature on our Zoom technology. And so if any council member wishes to raise an issue with regard to the minutes, will they please raise their hand? Seeing none, the minutes of those meetings will stand approved as presented. Next, we have public comment. Kristen Rush, is there anybody that's signed up for public comment?
There is not.
Okay, and let me make a comment about public comment. Certainly, we're pushing out so that people know that they can make public comment during our public comment portions of these meetings while we're meeting virtually. And we'll continue to push information out on that. And perhaps we can, before the meeting is over, if we can put up something on the screen or whatever that tells people who to contact to be added to the list to get into public comment or how to proceed with public comment. So with that, we'll move on to resolutions and ordinances. First, we have Resolution R20-032, a resolution authorizing a second extension to the effective date of the city manager's declaration of emergency relating to the novel coronavirus COVID-19 and the associated public health crisis. Mr. Devon or Ms. Morris?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The ongoing public health crisis caused the city manager to declare an emergency on March 13, 2020. On March 23rd, 2020, the City Council authorized an extension of the emergency declaration through April 6th. Since March 23rd, when Council last extended the emergency declaration, the number of COVID-19 cases have continued to increase within the Denver metro area and throughout Colorado. As the trend of confirmed cases, deaths, and hospitalizations has increased, Governor Polis issued an executive order ordering all Coloradans to stay at home due to the presence of COVID-19 in the state. This order became effective as of 8 a.m. on March 26th. On March 29th, President Trump announced the extension of social distancing guidelines that were due to expire in mid-April to remain in effect through April 30th. The ever-changing conditions associated with the public health crisis requires an environment that would allow for quick decisions in order to focus on the safety and well-being of the community and the city team members, delivery of core services, management of city resources, and general uncertainty associated with the recovery of Arvada businesses and institutions. Therefore, the city manager has requested an extension of the emergency declaration through April 30, 2020. This date is consistent with the extended social distancing guidelines announced by the president. The city manager will now discuss his use of the powers authorized under section 26-28 of the Arvada City Code.
Thank you, Rachel. Bruce is going to put up a slide that summarizes the actions that have been taken during the declaration of emergency. The first about 7 or 8 of these that you're going to see have were noted in the council report and should be familiar to you, as I believe I discussed them as we were implementing these actions. But you can see we opened the emergency center, we canceled all public events, we closed all city facilities, we canceled all public meetings, including city council meetings until tonight. We implemented remote work for employees as feasible. And for employees who could not work remotely, we implemented social distancing related health protocols as part of their daily routine. Next slide. We also authorized leave for employees who cannot work remotely or may be ill or absent to care for a family member. We initiated actions with the business community to address economic impacts. We developed some key internal and external messages. And then we also authorized an agreement for childcare services as needed for Arvada police officers and other city team members so they can work their assigned shifts. Next slide. The items that are on this slide are ones that have not been discussed previously with you. We had actually intended to include these in the council report. Unfortunately, in the course of getting this report ready, we failed to include them. But I'd like to go over them here. These have to do more with continuity of service, wherein we would have had them on a council agenda, but as we were going through the process of this emergency declaration, it was unclear as to when we were going to have the next council meeting. Action that I took to ensure continuity of service includes the authorization of an IGA with other public utilities as service providers in association with a program called COWARN, which stands for Colorado Warren, which is basically a public utility, shared services. We authorized an agreement with Xcel Energy for street lighting on Ralston Road, the phase 1 portion of Ralston Road from Old Wadsworth to Yukon. This would be new street lighting infrastructure. We authorized an agreement with Frontier Environmental Services to continue boring services. This was a change order, and you can see the amounts that are shown in parentheses. We authorized an agreement with M for the annual concrete replacement program. And then the final action was a change order with Diamond Construction for water and sanitary sewer main construction. If you have any questions about the authorization of these kinds of services for continuity or these kinds of agreements for continuity of service, city attorney can provide you with some additional information. Going back to the report and the recommended action, I think probably one of the things that we most have to, I think, agree on is that everything that the only expectation we really have right now is that the unexpected will occur. As a matter of fact, today, the city and county of Denver, Mayor Hancock announced that Denver would remain closed basically till April 30th. We have the president's order that expands the social distancing guidelines to April 30th. And then the governor, I think, is going to be holding a press conference later this evening. And what will come of that press conference, I think, is subject to a lot of speculation. We don't know for sure, but we believe at some point in time, we may see the state extend their order to April 30th, which will require then us to issue similar orders. As a matter of fact, we actually have our the last order I gave our city employees was that our stay-at-home order would continue through this Friday, April 10th. We believe we're going to have to extend that. And so these are the reasons why I'm asking for the emergency order to be extended to April 30th, is we believe that there will be additional issues along these lines that we'll have to react to and therefore make some quick decisions on. Bruce, you can remove the slide if you'd like.
Thank you. Any council questions? And I believe Ms. Ford, you're going to make the motion on this.
Yes.
Mr. Marriott, you've got a question?
I do. I have a question for the city manager. So Within this item, I know it indicates that there's no fiscal impact to this item, that the fiscal impact is, of course, largely associated with the COVID-19 situation. But I do have a question, and that is some of the actions that this emergency order, emergency declaration bring on do have fiscal impact to them. And I know they're probably somewhat hard to quantify, but when I think about the number of employees working remotely, there's certainly some cost to that. A leave being given out to people who cannot work remotely, and different issues like that. And I don't expect there to be any notification of what that fiscal impact of that might be. But if in the future, particularly if we have to extend this again, if we could have just some kind of an accounting, not specifically of what that is, but we ought to start talking about the costs of this and how much it's costing, just so we can start thinking in those terms, start getting our arms kind of around that. So that's more of a statement than a question, but that would be something I would ask for.
Okay, you're absolutely right, and we're certainly starting to track that now. We had a couple of we reported on a couple of issues that in the weekly memo to you guys, and we'll continue to keep track of that. I know our finance team is working really hard on that.
Very good. I don't see any other raised hands. Ms. Ford.
I move that R20-032, a resolution authorizing a second extension of the effective date of the city manager's declaration of emergency relating to the novel coronavirus, COVID-19, and the associated public health crisis be approved.
Thank you, and I'll do a roll call for voting. Mayor Pro Tem Miller.
Aye.
And Ms. Ford.
Aye.
Ms. Simpson.
Aye.
Mr. Marriott.
Yes.
Mr. Jones.
Aye.
Mr. Pfeiffer.
Aye.
And the mayor votes aye as well. That passes 7-0. Then we'll move on to the next emergency ordinance. This is 6B1, Council Bill 20-009, emergency ordinance adding section 26-38.5, powers of the municipal court, to Article 2, civil emergency, or local disaster regulations of Chapter 26, local emergency, or local disaster of the Arvada City Code, ordinance number 4726. Ms. Morris?
I apologize, I lost track of the unmute button. Okay, thank you, Your Honor. As with many of our departments, our municipal court's operations have been affected by the ongoing public health crisis. The Arvada Municipal Court has been closed to the public since March 16th. The current stay-at-home order extends at least through April 11th, 2020. This means the municipal court, like many other Colorado courts, will not be in session for at least 4 weeks. This is unprecedented. The closure has caused the municipal court to reset hundreds of cases. Another unique problem caused by the closure has to do with speedy trial deadlines. Typically, a defendant must be tried within about 90 days of being arraigned or entering a plea. Under current rules, a municipal court may dismiss a case if there is an unnecessary delay in the trial of a defendant. In certain situations, the rules allow a municipal court to extend the speedy trial deadline, but only for 28 days. Under the circumstances created by the COVID-19 pandemic, that will likely not give the municipal court enough time to reschedule the matter. Our recommended solution is to give the presiding municipal court judge more flexibility to react to this and future emergencies by allowing him or her to make decisions about court procedures, the location of hearing, and the timeframes within which judicial proceedings are held. The proposed ordinance will provide the presiding judge with that sort of flexibility. The judge may exercise these powers only following an emergency declaration by the city manager. Two important things to note for this particular item are that this is an emergency ordinance. Under our city charter, since it is an emergency ordinance, it does not require a first reading. So council may vote and approve the emergency ordinance tonight. It's also important to note that under the charter section governing emergency ordinances, this ordinance must be approved by at least 5 council members. Following team discussion, the Arvada team recommends that City Council approve this ordinance, an emergency ordinance adding section 26-38.5, powers of the municipal court, to Article 2, civil emergency, emergency, or local disaster regulations of Chapter 26, civil emergency, emergency, or local disaster of the Arvada City Code.
Very good. Mr. Pfeiffer?
Yeah, I just have a question. I just want to make sure we're crystal clear. I heard you say it and I see it, but I want to make sure it's, like I said, crystal. This is only when there is a declaration of emergency will the judge have this flexibility.
That is correct, Councilmember Pfeiffer.
So not all the time, only during emergencies.
That is correct. The extent of the declaration, the 90 days they have, may extend a little bit further out than the term of a declared emergency, but their powers to bump out deadlines only exist during the emergency. If that
All
makes
right.
sense.
Thank you. And of course, when you're ready, Mayor, I'll make the motion.
Exactly. Mr. Jones, you're next.
So I just wanted to follow up for just a second on the 90 days. If in fact things begin to normalize over the next several weeks, and it's evident that they've been able to reschedule and get people handled in an appropriate time frame, do we take another action then to remove this emergency ordinance, and so that the courts then go back to kind of normal operating procedures?
The court's order would only last for 90 days total. It has to be made during a period of declared emergency. The ordinance itself that you're approving tonight is to give the municipal court judge the authority to make those orders that it needs to during that time period. But the idea being that you would leave the ordinance in place for as long as we need it, but we wouldn't be going back to remove the ordinance itself. The authority of the municipal court judge will naturally expire to issue orders like that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so we don't have to take another action if in fact things got back to normal, or I should say, hopefully when things get back to normal. This will just expire after 90 days. But I guess my question is that as things get back to normal, and the judge has the right to do however he or she may feel to make sure that people have access to a speedy trial, et cetera, but yet we don't need the judge to have as much flexibility with as this order is laid out. How do we rein back the control if 60 days from now everything's good, and the judge still has 30 days and essentially of this emergency order in place? I'm just trying to make sure that we don't do anything or create a situation where then someone can come back and say, well, the judge acted inside of this order but really shouldn't have been, kind of thing.
Is it the time period that you're concerned about? The time, the 90 days that the order might last?
Yeah, I would prefer to see a shorter period of time. And then if we have to approve it again in 30 to 45 days, then we do it again, extend it, as opposed to just making a blanket 90 days. That's just kind of my thoughts around this particular ordinance.
Okay.
Let me respond to that real quickly. My thought would be, Mr. Jones, that if the sun starts shining a lot brighter and things look a lot better, we can certainly repeal this prior to the end of 90 days.
Yeah, well, that was my original question, but it sounded like the counsel of Ms. Morris was to just let it ride until it expired at 90 days. So that was, you asked my question better than I did, was, can we repeal it or bring it back sooner than the 90 days? It doesn't necessarily speak to that.
It doesn't. And if the period of time, the 90 days, the reason that we built that in was because we were concerned, given how long this particular pandemic seems like it may last, we wanted to give the judge the flexibility to have an order that they issued during the emergency that had the ability to set out court deadlines and create court schedules outside of that up to 90 days. But you could approve an ordinance with fewer days than that.
I think what's important is to what the mayor said, that if we determine or deem that we should remove it, then I think we take council action. But if we do that and the city's emergency order has been removed, then it has to go through a first reading and so on and so forth. So I think it might be better than to have a shorter time period and extend it if needed.
Okay, Mr. Marriott, you're next, and then if Mr. Pfeiffer makes the motions, Mr. Jones, you can certainly move to amend.
Okay. Two questions for Ms. Morris. The first one would be, so this gives the judge some flexibility around planning the operations of the court, but does it give him flexibility as far as the right to a speedy trial? Because that's a little bit concerning. Is that outside of the court's authority to take that away?
I'm going to have Nora Stenson respond to this particular question.
Nora, if you'll unmute and respond.
Good evening, members of council and Mr. Mayor. Let me see if I'll ask Bruce to start the video. Thank you for your question. The last question, I believe, was from Mr. Marriott, and he asked questions specifically about the speedy trial aspect of the ordinance. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct, Nora. I realize this ordinance gives the judge some flexibility around the operations of the court. My question is, does this also give him flexibility in someone's right to a speedy trial, or how that part is handled?
So it does give the court some flexibility around the concept of speedy trial. So speedy trial is a right that we are all familiar with. However, the courts themselves have recognized that there has to be some degree of flexibility with how a right to speedy trial is organized. There's a fair amount of case law, particularly at the federal level, that gives federal judges quite a bit of latitude in deciding issues around the concept of speedy trial. There isn't a whole lot of case law on that in Colorado, but there certainly is nothing to prohibit it. We have rules relating to municipal courts, but otherwise, it's our view that the judges have a fair amount of leeway in making speedy trial determinations. So the answer to your question is yes, this does give the municipal court judge essentially the same powers that federal judges would have. In other words, they'd have some leeway in setting speedy trial deadlines. And then one other comment I'll make to Council Member Jones's question. The council should keep in mind that the ability of the court to issue these orders exists only so long as the city manager's emergency declaration is in place. Of course, because speedy trial or court setting may last out beyond the emergency declaration, any order made will almost by definition extend longer than the period of the emergency declaration. But to answer Council Member Jones's question, once the emergency declaration is over, then the court would no longer have the abilities that it has under this ordinance. So the ordinance itself will stay in place. It's just that the judge's ability to issue orders under this ordinance will be limited to just the period of the emergency declaration. So I hope that answers your questions.
Okay.
Mr. Pfeiffer?
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, I
Yes.
had one other question.
Okay, go ahead.
And I believe I know the answer to this, but I just want to be clear. This emergency or this ordinance, emergency ordinance, giving the court flexibility is a one-time thing, that this will not won't come into effect every time an emergency is declared by the city manager. That if this were to come back in a different emergency situation, this would have to be passed again. This doesn't live on. Is that correct?
Actually, Mr. Marriott, this ordinance, the proposed ordinance makes a change to the existing Chapter 26 of the Arvada City Code. So this ordinance itself, it simply adds one section into our existing Arvada City Code. So the section that's added would remain a part of the Arvada City Code unless and until council decides to repeal it.
Okay, so in plain language, does that mean that anytime an emergency is declared, that then these provisions would be in place?
That is correct. Anytime the manager declares an emergency, then the municipal court would have the power set forth in this ordinance.
Okay, so let me ask a follow-up question then. Would it be appropriate then to limit this particular ordinance to this particular emergency declaration period of time? And that if we'd like to have this ordinance as a permanent part of our Arvada City Code, that we take it up in an environment when we don't have an emergency declaration in place and go through the complete process of a first reading and all the notification that we would normally have for any other ordinance, and then pass it in an environment that's not an emergency, so that the people who are for it and the people who are against it all have a reasonable chance to weigh in. Would that be an appropriate course of action to take? Or a possible, even a better question, maybe a possible course of action to take?
It would be a possible course of action. I think what you're referring to would be something that would be known as a sunset provision. So we could certainly sunset this ordinance so that this section essentially would be repealed at the end of the city manager's declaration of an emergency. And we could also put in the ordinance a statement that any order issued by the municipal court's presiding judge before the end of this particular declared emergency, that all of those orders would remain in effect even after this particular emergency, as to those cases that are impacted by this emergency.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Mr. Pfeiffer.
Well, Mr. Marriott just answered my question. So I was kind of going down the same path. I thought it would maybe be more appropriate that this, instead of this being institutionalized in our ordinances, would it be just best as we do this on a per emergency declaration time? Because I picture if there was floods, like we had floods a few years ago, I don't see why a judge would need to do a 90-day, or try to make any adjustments and flexibility during that event. That event didn't disrupt our court system, didn't disrupt anything else. So I hate to have a blanket statement put in our ordinance like that. So I agree with where Mr. Marriott's questioning was going. And maybe we should just keep it that way.
Okay. Ms. Miller, you're next.
Thank you. I agree both with council members Marriott and Pfeiffer. And I think that if this ordinance isn't going to pass this evening, I think that we need to do something in order to give the judge some leeway during this time, because we won't meet in a business setting again for 4 weeks.
The council does have the discretion to pass the ordinance with amendments if they choose to do so.
Right. Mr. Jones.
Yeah, I think Mr. Marriott has a really good way of getting into my brain and saying things that I wish that I could have said. But that's really, that was my major concern, was that we were creating an ordinance that was essentially changing how things would look in the future. And my thought was, to Mr. Pfeiffer's point, the floods. I think that there are some emergencies that are declared that absolutely where this is appropriate, but I think we take those things on one at a time. And so I would just ask that whatever changes or amendments to Mr. Pfeiffer's motion be offered up by our city attorney instead of me.
Okay. And Mr. Pfeiffer?
So is that a friendly amendment that was being proposed?
One from me, yes.
So do we want to make this, the friendly amendment would be to sunset this ordinance at the end of the declaration, emergency declaration?
Why don't we have one of our two city attorneys sort of read out what they would propose as language, and then Mr. Pfeiffer, if you want to just say that that's your motion, we could vote on it. If after it's presented by the attorneys in terms of sort of reading out some proposed language, and then if anybody has anything they'd like to say on it before we vote.
So, Mr. Mayor, if I may, what I am hearing from council is that we should essentially add a couple of sentences at the end of the material that already exists in the proposed section 26-38.5. And so the next two sentences would say something to the effect of the ordinance, this ordinance will be repealed automatically or sunsetted to coincide with the end of the city manager's declared emergency, the one that we're currently operating under. And then the second part of that will be that any order issued by the presiding municipal court judge under the current emergency will remain valid until after the declared emergency ends. And that is because it does not make sense to end any orders that the municipal court judge issues with regard to pending cases. It wouldn't make sense to end those to stop the validity of those orders at the end of the declared emergency, because it's going to take several weeks, actually probably a number of months, to get through the backlog of municipal cases. So any order that's issued would have to remain in effect for those cases. Am I getting that right?
I think that seems to accurately portray. Ms. Ford?
If there could be some evaluation of this after the fact, prior to a discussion on future changes to the city code.
That's a good point. Mr. Marriott?
Sorry, I had my hand up before Nora weighed in. I think she basically covered what I was going to amend the motion to. I'd be happy to read it out and or after the motion's made, but here's what I was going to amend the motion to say. After the motion was read, I would add to it that this ordinance will sunset when the current emergency declaration expires, and that any judge's orders will continue for the 90-day duration period of this ordinance. Nora, does that cover what you were trying to say?
I think it needs to remain valid, is what you're saying, during the order.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah, either way.
Yes, I think that's sufficient. We can work with that. We'll go ahead and amend that pursuant to Mr. Marriott and council's direction.
Mr. Pfeiffer, do you accept that as a friendly amendment?
Well, I haven't read this point of order.
What's
Right?
that?
I don't think I've read a motion yet. So do I need to?
Why don't you let Mr. Pfeiffer make his motion, and then I'll be happy to propose an amendment.
Well, I can include it in my motion, but after discussion. So
yeah,
let me
I
go
don't
ahead and make the motion. I move that Council Bill 20-009, Emergency Ordinance adding sections 26-38.5, Powers of the Municipal Court, to Article 2, Civil Emergency, or Local Disaster Regulation of Chapter 26, Civil Emergency, or Local Disaster of the Arvada City Code. Also, this ordinance will sunset and to be considered with the city manager's emergency declaration. At the end of his declaration, it'll sunset. Any orders under the current declaration will remain valid until it sunsets. Is that fair?
Actually, it's beyond when it sunsets.
Yeah.
It
Will remain valid.
Yeah, the language I might suggest using here, Councilmember Pfeiffer, is that any orders issued during the current period of declared emergency will remain in effect as described in the ordinance.
Okay, I'll accept that. That'll be my motion.
Very good.
To be approved, number 4726, and published in full with the amended language.
Very good. Councilmember Ford, how do you vote?
Aye.
Councilmember Simpson? Again?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Miller,
Aye.
and Councilmember Marriott,
Yes.
Councilmember Jones,
Aye.
Councilmember Pfeiffer,
Aye.
and the mayor votes aye as well. That passes 7-0. Thank you. Good discussion. We don't need the defense bar coming in and beating us up for doing it the wrong way. And I think this provides some protection for folks. And I agree that once this crisis is over, when it's a calmer time, that we ought to revisit this and look at how we address what types of emergencies in the future. I think the commentary about the floods was right on point, that it's only certain types of emergencies that really rise to the level of needing what we've done here tonight. Okay, let's move on to the next agenda item. And that's going to be appointments to boards and commissions. Every year, we have so many wonderful citizens who apply for our various boards and commissions. And so tonight, we're going to take action to make the appointments for the individuals that we've interviewed. Council does a great job of first of all, screening the huge number of applicants that we get for all these positions. And then we interview a select number for each board or commission, and then we discuss it as a group and make our recommendations. And so at this time, I'm going to begin with Councilmember Mayor Pro Tem Miller to make a motion with regard to the Arvada Arts and Cultural Commission. Ms.
Thank
Miller.
you, Your Honor. I move to appoint Heather Steffen, Lisa Croy, and Rob Castro to the Arvada Arts and Culture Commission for 4-year terms ending April 30th, 2024. Evelyn Minor for a partial term ending April 30, 2023.
Okay, Ms. Ford,
Aye.
Ms. Simpson,
Aye.
Mr. Marriott,
Yes.
Ms. Miller,
Aye.
Mr. Jones,
Aye.
Mr. Pfeiffer,
Aye.
Mayor votes aye as well. That passes 7-0. Ms. Miller,
I move to reappoint Suzanne Ellenbogen for a 4-year term ending April 30th, 2024.
Ms. Ford, Ms. Ford, if you'll vote. You're
Aye.
unmuted. There you go. Ms. Simpson,
Aye.
Mr. Marriott,
Yes.
Ms. Miller,
Aye.
Mr. Jones,
Aye.
Mr. Pfeiffer.
Aye.
Mayor votes aye as well. Next, we'll move on to Mr. Pfeiffer to make a motion with regard to the Arvada Festivals Commission.
Yes, I move to appoint Mark Johnson, Stephanie Bednar, Kim Major, Rebecca Lovison to the Arvada Festival Commission for full 3-year terms ending April 30th, 2023. Ethan Lutz to the Arvada Festival Commission for an unexpired term of ending April 30th, 2021.
Ms. Ford,
Aye.
Ms. Simpson,
Aye.
Ms. Miller,
Aye.
Mr. Pfeiffer,
Aye.
Mr. Jones,
Aye.
Mr. Marriott.
Yes.
Mayor votes aye. We're all getting a little chuckle out of this because we all talked about how we were going to respond to motions. And Mr. Marriott continues at times to be the odd man out. So we'll let him continue to be that way. That passes 7-0. Mr. Pfeiffer?
Yes, I move to reappoint Peter Kazura, Charles Schick, and Stanley Sharman for 3-year term ending April 30th, 2023.
Hey, Mr. Marriott,
Aye.
Ms. Ford,
Aye.
Ms. Simpson,
Yes.
Ms. Miller.
Aye.
We have to have some laughs here with some of this. It's tough times, but to be able to chuckle at times is good. Mr. Pfeiffer?
Aye.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
The mayor votes yes as well. That passes 7-0. Next, I'll make a motion to appoint Paul Bunyard to the Arvada Urban Renewal Authority for a 5-year term ending April 30th, 2025. And I call upon Ms. Miller.
Thank you, Your Honor. I move to ratify Mayor Williams' appointment of Paul Bunyard to the Arvada Urban Renewal Authority for a 5-year term ending April 30th, 2025.
Ms. Ford,
Aye.
Ms. Simpson,
Aye.
Mr. Marriott,
Yes.
Ms. Miller,
Aye.
Mr. Jones,
Aye.
Mr. Pfeiffer.
Aye.
Mayor votes aye as well. That passes unanimously. Next, we'll move to the Golf Advisory Committee. Ms. Ford.
I move to appoint Julie Rennie and Ally Brady to the Golf Advisory Committee for 3-year terms ending April 30th, 2023.
Ms. Ford, how do you vote on your motion?
I say aye.
Ms. Simpson,
Aye.
Mr. Marriott,
Yes.
Ms. Miller,
Aye.
Mr. Jones,
Aye.
Mr. Pfeiffer.
Aye.
Mayor votes yes as well. That passes unanimously. Ms. Ford.
I move to reappoint Timothy Blake Rogers for a 3-year term ending April 30th, 2023.
And how do you vote on your motion?
Aye.
Ms. Simpson,
Aye.
Mr. Marriott,
Yes.
Ms. Miller,
Aye.
Mr. Jones,
Aye.
Mr. Pfeiffer.
Aye.
Mayor votes aye. That passes 7-0. We'll move on to David Jones, who's going to address the Human Services Advisory Committee.
Thank you, Your Honor. I move to appoint Tracy Brooks, Shelley Beasley, and Alyssa Haysbrook to the Human Services Committee for a 3-year term ending April 30th, 2023.
Ms. Ford,
Aye.
Ms. Simpson,
Aye.
Mr. Marriott,
Yes.
Ms. Miller,
Aye.
Mr. Jones,
Aye.
Mr. Pfeiffer.
Aye.
Mayor votes aye. That passes unanimously. Mr. Jones.
I move to reappoint Laura Andes for a 3-year term ending April 30th, 2023.
Ms. Ford,
Aye.
Ms. Simpson,
Aye.
Mr. Marriott,
Yes.
Ms. Miller,
Aye.
Mr. Jones,
Aye.
Mr. Pfeiffer.
Aye.
Mayor votes aye. That passes unanimously. Next, we'll move to the Parks Advisory Committee. Mr. Marriott.
Thank you, Your Honor. I move to appoint Jamie Sandoval, Tim Sloan, and Grace Dowling to the Park Advisory Committee for 3-year terms ending April 30th, 2023. Todd Munson and Max Coxholt to the Park Advisory Committee for unexpired terms ending April 30th, 2022, and Jerry Sampson for an unexpired term ending April 30th, 2021.
Ms. Ford,
Aye.
Ms. Simpson,
Aye.
Mr. Marriott,
Yes.
Ms. Miller,
Aye.
Mr. Jones,
Aye.
Mr. Pfeiffer.
Aye.
Mayor votes aye. That passes unanimously. And then Mr. Marriott.
I move to reappoint Melissa Lloyd for a 3-year term ending April 30th, 2023.
Ms. Ford,
Aye.
Ms. Simpson,
Aye.
Mr. Marriott,
Yes.
Ms. Miller,
Aye.
Mr. Jones,
Aye.
and Mr. Pfeiffer.
Aye.
Mayor votes aye. That passes 7-0. Next, we'll move on to the Planning Commission. Ms. Simpson.
I move to appoint Andrew Gay to the Planning Commission for an unexpired term ending April 30, 2022.
Ms. Ford,
Aye.
Ms. Simpson,
Aye.
Mr. Marriott,
Yes.
Ms. Miller,
Aye.
Mr. Jones,
Aye.
Mr. Pfeiffer.
Aye.
Mayor votes aye. That passes 7-0. Thank you. Next, Ms. Simpson.
I move to reappoint T.O. Owens for a 4-year term ending April 30, 2024.
Thank you, Ms. Ford.
Aye.
Ms. Simpson.
Aye.
Mr. Marriott.
Yes.
Ms. Miller.
Aye.
Mr. Jones.
Aye.
Mr. Pfeiffer.
Aye.
Mayor votes aye. That passes 7-0. And then back to Mayor Pro Tem Miller, the Sustainability Advisory Committee.
Thank you, Your Honor. I move to appoint David Wagman and Rebecca Hernandez to the Sustainability Advisory Committee for a 3-year term ending April 30th, 2023, and Rachel Smallwood to the Sustainability Advisory Committee for an unexpired term ending April 30, 2022.
Thank you, Ms. Ford.
Aye.
Ms. Simpson.
Aye.
Marriott.
Yes.
Ms. Miller.
Aye.
Mr. Jones.
Aye.
Mr. Pfeiffer.
Aye.
Mayor votes aye. That passes unanimously. Ms. Miller.
I move to reappoint Mindy Moore and Catherine Griffith for a 3-year term ending April 30th, 2023.
Thank you, Ms. Ford.
Aye.
Ms. Simpson.
Aye.
Mr. Marriott.
Aye.
Ms. Miller.
Aye.
Mr. Jones.
Aye.
Mr. Pfeiffer.
Aye.
Mayor votes aye. That passes unanimously. That concludes our appointments. Again, I want to thank everybody that applied, whether or not they were selected. We are blessed in Arvada to have so many people that want to give back to our community. And I look forward to the day when these boards and commissions can begin meeting again in earnest and get us back on our track to keeping Arvada the very special place it is. So with that, we'll move on to a couple of workshops. Mr. Devon, first one's discussion of the revised council schedule of public hearings for quasi-judicial items and significant community issues. Mr. Devon.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, what we have provided for you tonight is our plan to re-engage in public meetings, including quasi-judicial items, public hearings, and workshops. From a background, well, getting back to, I think we've talked about the public health crisis enough tonight, and we understand that it has taken its toll on the ability for the city council to safely conduct its meetings. And that has created a situation where we have a backlog of items that we have to deal with. I believe Bruce is going to put up some slides here that will help us to discuss what our plan going forward is. What we'd like to do is we've constructed here the meetings that would occur between now and July 6th. And we are proposing May 11th as a business meeting. Actually, after discussing that a little bit today, we decided to kind of reverse course and actually have May 11th be a workshop and then May 18th be a business meeting. We have a national holiday on May 25th, which is Memorial Day. And then on June 1st, we are proposing both June 1st and June 8th to be business meetings. June 15th be a workshop. June 22nd are the appointee evaluations. And then June 29th, we show currently as the 5th Monday where we would not have a meeting. And then July 6th would be a business meeting. Next slide.
Go ahead.
Okay, so here's the revised public hearing schedule. And again, we had originally thought we would reopen our public meetings with the rehearing of Grandview Station. After talking a little bit more with our team this morning, we determined that we would rather not open with Grandview Station on May the 11th, and instead what we would propose to do is have the workshop items that are currently scheduled for May the 18th occur on May the 11th. I'll get to those workshop items in a second. But when you see Grandview Station there, we are looking at the new scheduled date as May the 18th. Then on June the 1st would be a rather busy night because we're proposing several public hearings. We're proposing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 public hearings for June the 1st. However, we believe that with the exception of the Land Development Code item, we don't believe those public hearing items would be would create significant interest in public comment, which is why we are proposing them right now for all to occur on June the 1st. So one would be the additional appropriation for fiscal year 2020. We'd like to push that back to June 1st to give us an opportunity to kind of reevaluate our financial position by that time. As Councilmember Marriott pointed out earlier, he would like us to, and I think the entire council would like us to account for the expenditures during the public health emergency. So it makes sense to back that to June 1st. The IGA with Blackhawk for the use of augmentation stations, we don't see that as being significantly, creating a lot of significant interest from the public. But the ordinance repealing the Land Development Code and adopting a new land development code, as well as the companion item, which is the Land Development Code remapping of the section west of Alkire Street and north of West 80th Avenue, which includes the Candelas area. We do believe that those two public hearing items, which would really be in a lot of ways considered kind of at the same time because they're related, we do expect that to generate some level of public interest and some discussion by the city council. Now, we've had a lot of public meetings regarding these items. And we've talked about them over the approximate 2-year process for the Land Development Code update. However, we think that those items would, could be compatible during that time. And then moving on down to the right-of-way, Chapter 78 public improvements, which are basically the escrow funds that we've talked to the city council about. That's another one that we're looking at for June 1st. And then repealing and reenacting some land use fees. This is an association with some updated fees for planning purposes. We're also proposing that for June 1st. And then we also show the co-warn network. That's actually been one of those that I approved during just recently. So we wouldn't have to have that item considered on that particular meeting. And then the final item for June the 1st, actually that is the final item for June the 1st. So that's the public hearing schedule for June 1st. And we actually had co-warn, I'm sorry, for June the 8th. So we would be able to get the public hearing items basically all taken care of between May the 18th and June the 8th. It does crowd that June 1st agenda, but we felt we could get those multiple public hearing items done on June 1st, since the majority of them should not generate a lot of significant public comment. So with that, I'd like to stop and let you.
Yeah, let me chime in first. Why don't we do all of them except for the Land Development Code 2 items? Why don't we move those up to May 11th and do it in combination with that workshop? Even though they're pretty rudimentary and not going to be too contentious by any stretch, just the volume of them on a night that we know we're going to have significant discussion on the Land Development Code does not make sense to me.
Okay, so I think that sounds like something we could do. I would like to ask if the sponsors for those items that are listening in, part of the team, see any problem with moving those items up to May the 11th.
So this is Ryan Stachelski, if that's okay to jump in.
Yes.
Yeah, go ahead, Ryan.
So the concerns I see, are first readings. So we need to have an opportunity before May 11th to do a first reading, since these are all public hearings. So that's something that needs to be considered. Certainly the right-of-way Chapter 78 public improvements, that's something that certainly could go on May 11th. The repealing and reacting for the land development code fees, that is in conjunction with the development code. There are new fees that are created only after the new code is enacted. And so that's why it would, here's a start my video. That's why that would take part. So really the repealing and reenacting the section of the fees goes along with the two LDC items there.
Okay.
So that's why those three are a package.
Okay. But can't we do first readings by a meeting that we're doing through Zoom? Between now, I mean, we've got, you know, the rest of April and the first week in May. It seems like we're wasting time if we can be doing some stuff in the meantime.
Yeah, Mayor, I think we could, I don't see any reason unless Rachel or Kristen see a reason. I don't see any reason why we couldn't get the first reading scheduled during one of the meetings, one of the council meetings before we can return to normal.
I have no objection to that. I don't see any problem with that from a legal perspective.
Right. Mr. Pfeiffer?
Well, you were going exactly where I was going. I just feel like for 5 weeks being not productive when there's some low hanging fruit things that we can keep moving forward. And some of these items could impact our economy and keep it going. You know, it's kind of a supply chain thing. And I'm wondering even if, could we even do some of these items even prior, that may not be as much. I mean, because I hate to see us just sit here for 5 weeks before we start back up the engines. So that's just my comments. I think we should continue having meetings, at least another business meeting on the 20th of April, and either do first readings or get things back on track for May.
Okay, so I don't see anybody else with their hand raised. Can we have, I appreciate you wanting to get things back on the calendar, but my sense is to the extent that we can speed up some of these, particularly the ones that are like the IGA with Blackhawk, that's something I think we could probably address in the next, however, I mean, we got to do first reading, but let's move up those first reading as much as possible. And even on a couple of them where it's not a big policy decision, it's not a quasi judicial, where it's a little bit perfunctory. Let's try to get those done while we're meeting remotely, so that once we're back together, that we can spend appropriate amounts of times on the contentious ones.
Certainly, we'll do what we can to move the as many of the first readings forward to April 20th, and then reset the public hearing date accordingly, and then you know, we'll look at some of the other ones that we believe are, as you called it, perfunctory, and see if we can, if there's some opportunity to get those done even before we reconvene back on May the 11th.
Right. Very good. Anything else from anybody on this item? Okay, let's move on to your next workshop item.
Yeah, so Bruce will put up the, I'm sorry, Bruce, if you can go back to, there we go, the workshops. So on the workshops, we had some workshops scheduled in March and in April, and we're proposing to have them rescheduled according to the calendar that you see in front, which includes purchasing limits discussion, rescheduling that to May 18th. Short-term rental, rescheduling that to May 18th. We think there might be a number of people that may like to attend that workshop discussion. Myers Pool, rescheduling that to May 18th. The .04 trolley, which we had scheduled on April 13th, moving that to June 15th. Micro mobility and traffic calming pilot programs, moving that workshop item to June 15th. The parking study for the transit hub in Old Town, rescheduling that to June 15th. Building and fire code update would be July 6th, and then tobacco and vaping on July 6th as well.
again, some of these, because these are workshops where we're not taking public testimony anyway, and people have access, the public has access either through Channel 8 or live streaming or other methodologies. Are there any of these we could be doing here sometime in April or early May before we start convening?
Well, if we're going to look at the ones that probably would have the least amount of public input, I would say purchasing limits could be done along those lines. And
Well, I would think that certainly purchasing limits, the presentation on the 04 trolley, again, we're not taking public comment at these. That's one you could present information to us on, the micro mobility and traffic calming pilot programs. I mean, I'm just trying to keep us busy and moving forward so that once we can gather together again, that we can really hit the ground running.
yeah, we can move these further, Council, up in the calendar. I would ask that we focus on April the 27th as probably the first workshop that we could schedule. And part of the reason for the 0.04 trolley is I know there are some members of the community that might be interested in participating in that. Again, we don't take public testimony, but we might have people that would like to actually, participate by, watching that meeting in person. But, we were trying to be ultra, I guess, cautious in making sure that we accounted for any public participation, but we can move these faster if you'd like us to.
Okay. Bruce, could you take down this schedule so that I can see people, so I can see who's got their, Ms. Ford?
Mayor, on the May 18th, it was my understanding that the rehearing of the Grandview Station was proposed for the 18th. So that would eliminate those workshops, would it not? On the 18th? The purchasing limits, the short-term rental, the Myers pool?
We would, Councilmember Ford, I think we could move those to May the 11th. We were looking at switching a workshop and a business meeting as proposed originally. So if we had Grandview hearing on May 18th, we could schedule a workshop on May the 11th.
Okay.
Ms. Miller, I think I may have been channeling you a little bit and wanting to move things on a little quicker.
You were reading my mind, Mr. Mayor. When I look at a lot of those workshops, we can be doing those, as you said, we don't take public comment and we reach out to the community and they have our phone number and email and, happy to Skype and do a video call and, watching on TV and submitting comments via email and calling in and asking questions. I think that's the right way to go. And I agree wholeheartedly to keep moving things forward.
Mr. Jones?
Sorry, I had to get my cursor back over to the unmute button. Just a couple of thoughts that are unrelated to these workshops, but it seems to me like we've got a lot of businesses that are struggling right now. We've got a lot of people asking questions with regard to how they're going to be impacted personally. Should we be scheduling, pushing some of these workshops off and scheduling something, that AIDA or others can be, from the city can be kind of updating our citizens and businesses as it relates to really how do we get our Arvada back on track? Because, for me, Myers Pool, the Point Trolley, some of these things don't seem to matter a whole lot in this moment, especially as businesses are struggling today. So I would just ask the staff to think a little differently about what workshops we ought to be doing right now with regard to getting our businesses back online.
I appreciate that. Ms. Simpson?
Thank you. I actually just wanted to reiterate that I agree with the sense of keeping us busy during April and doing some of these. The only ones on here that I could see that would generate significant public comment would be short-term rentals and probably Myers Pool, since it's a big issue in District 2. The others, varying, but I could definitely see us keeping busy. And I agree with Council Member Jones as well. I would like to see something on what we're doing in Arvada. Tonight we're talking about our businesses, but perhaps also what we're doing for our residents, just to keep the public aware of what's upcoming, what resources are available to them, and to help us get through this crisis together.
Very good. Mr. Marriott.
Thank you, Your Honor. I have the one item that hadn't been mentioned on here is the repealing and reenacting the solid waste ordinance. And if I understand this correct, from what Mr. Devon just said, we would have a first reading on the 18th and then a public hearing on the 8th of June. I'd like to just point out that's 21 days in between the two, which is a very, very, very small amount of time for probably the issue that will have the most public participation. And also point out that on this issue, we don't have a workshop scheduled, nor have we on this, since we have developed pricing and all the details of the program. So most of our residents don't know anything about it. And so we would be doing a first reading and then an ordinance in a very short time window without really letting the folks know. Now that the original schedule for this particular issue is no longer in place, I wonder if it's not time to just take a breath here and do this through our kind of a regular process that we do these issues, particularly something that's going to have as much public interest as this, and make sure that all the public gets an opportunity to participate.
Mr. Pfeiffer.
So two things. One, we haven't talked about May 4th. I'm assuming there's nothing we can do on May 4th as well. We should keep that in mind. That's the first Monday. And then also, hearing the comments from my peers here, maybe a good idea would be from now until we're at least cleared out of this emergency for a little bit. I suspect it'll come back this fall, but what we could do is start every one of these meetings with maybe an update of what the staff is doing or the team are doing, the county's doing around Arvada centric in the meantime. So not only give a little bit of our citizens and our businesses an update of where we're at and what we're doing for 10, 15, 20 minutes, but then we can get into our normal business. Maybe that's an offering of a suggestion for the team to kind of give an update to the viewers and our community. It's an idea.
I think that's a good idea, and I think that addresses both what Mr. Jones and Ms. Simpson are saying. So that's a way to. We want to stay busy, Mr. Devon, and that means keeping you all. I know you're all very busy anyway, but there's important work that needs to get done.
Yeah, we want to get the important work done too. I think we might have taken a little bit too seriously some of the concerns about the making sure that we provided opportunities for public participation, including during workshops. So let us take, based on the input that we've received here, let's take another look at this schedule and give you another opportunity to view it before we set everything in. We certainly got the picture about moving forward with workshop items. We anticipate a meeting on April 20th and a workshop on April 27th. And then we'll fold the rest of the dates in after that.
Very good. Thank you. Okay, Mr. Devon, you've got another workshop item.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, we have a proposal that we wanted to bring to you tonight that I believe has some level of urgency in it. It's a discussion of our response, business emergency response and recovery, which we've had a number of people on our team working very hard on over the last week. I might remind you that on March the 27th, Congress passed and the president signed into law the CARES Act that has been something that we've been looking at very closely in order to move forward with it and determine what our best response in order to work with this new law would be. And what I'd like to do now is invite Ryan Stachelski and Brian Archer to present some information that we would like you all to react to tonight, and then perhaps give us some further direction.
Very good. And if we could switch back to the other screen. Thank you. Okay.
Ryan?
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. Thanks so much for taking the time tonight to listen to this important discussion. As you've all acknowledged, and something that has impacted our community deeply has been how this pandemic has affected our business community. And while we're talking about some specific measures that we're looking at taking going forward from tonight, please also know, as I know that you're aware, that AIDA, the city, the Chamber of Commerce, the BID, Community First Foundation, Apex, and a number of other community partners have been on daily phone calls talking about how they can be reaching out to the business community. And so while we're talking about some specific programs tonight, there really has been a concerted effort that they have dubbed themselves the Arvada Resiliency Task Force to show how resilient we are as a community and helping support the businesses. Programs such as the Takeout Takeover, the Child for Champions, and many other programs that they have enacted all appear on the business toolkit that has been shared multiple times in multiple forums to all of the businesses in Arvada. So with that, we were thinking about, okay, what are the next steps that we need to take in order to be able to make sure that we can recover as a community from this? And in our discussions, we really look at this in twofold from a business perspective. Number one is the impact on the individual businesses that all need support. And I'll talk about specific programs that we're considering for that in a minute. But then the second part of this, and I'll consider this to be kind of the micro approach with the individual businesses and the macro approach of the entire community, is really understanding that we need to also look at how we can recover as a community, not just the individual businesses in it. And so from a macro approach, what we really want to make sure is that we're able to provide holistic information through all of our business entities that provide different levels of services, most notably through the examples that I just used, through the chamber and the bid and those types of things. So one of our important strategies is making sure that we support those entities that have the imperative information in the local context that can be shared with our business communities, making sure that everybody has a place to go and that there are trusted resources. Right now there's lots of people sending out tons of information, but the good thing about the relationships that we already have in this community is that businesses are able to be in contact with people that they know and that they trust in order to be able to make sure that this is information that's not a wild goose chase, that's not going to go down a black hole, that they're able to take that information and it's actionable information that will allow those businesses to make the decisions that they need to. So really having that environment around being able to get their feedback on the ground with information is imperative to supporting our business community. Second, it also relates to the regulatory environment. And, we were incredibly forward thinking and supportive. I'm going to move my head so you guys don't get the glare off the thing. I apologize for that. You'll probably still get a glare, but that's a different glare. So sorry. Is you guys were incredibly forward thinking about where we're trying to go as a development community. The land development code really positions ourselves because one of the assets that we have in order to allow ourselves to recover from this is our real estate. And understanding how our real estate works as the business environment can recover. And where we're going with the land development code reduces the regulatory environment that's needed in order for businesses to be able to adapt with appropriate measures in order to use that real estate so that we can recover as a community. Now, in this recovery, we're not suggesting that we're taking any of the safeguards or any of the other policy decisions the council has made as it relates to where we're going with the land development code. I'm simply acknowledging the fact that you guys have already done the hard work of positioning ourselves to be able to be more responsive to the real estate needs of the community in order for them to be able to react quicker to this new world that we're entering altogether. So that's the macro approach that we're looking at from a business support, redevelopment, real estate perspective. The other micro approach is getting support into the hands of our small businesses. Now, the reality of the situation is that this crisis, this issue, emergency is so deep that the city itself cannot financially support what these businesses need. It is just so deep and so wide that we don't have the financial resources or the wherewithal to be able to support them for the long-term recovery of those businesses. However, there is a role financially for the city of Arvada to play. Fortunately, as City Manager Devin pointed out, the federal government did pass the CARES Act, and that's the long-term support that these businesses are going to be able to reach out to in order to get the level of funding they need to be able to carry them through this crisis. It's got the appropriate interest rates, it's got forgivable loans, it's got a whole breadth of different information. But the problem is it's going to take time in order to get that money into the hands of our businesses. And so our approach from our perspective at the local level is really, how do you bridge the gap from today until when they can get the money in their hands, hits their bank accounts, and be able to then sustain them until the long-term recovery. And so we are not intending to put enough money aside in order to be able to help every business, because we just don't have that wherewithal. So we need to have a targeted approach to be able to leverage as most money as we can and to be able to support as many businesses. So at our proposal is to create a $2 million loan fund that would be created from resources from the city of Arvada, from ORA, and from IEDA. That would be a loan program that would be able to get money into the hands of businesses as quickly as possible. The basic parameters of the loan would be a $10,000 loan that we could issue within a short number of days, say 5 days or less, business days, after application, that we would target it to specific smaller businesses in Arvada, businesses with less than 50 employees, and that were also their businesses was specifically impacted by the health crisis and by the public health orders and their being shut down or reduced services. So things like bars and restaurants, but also other retail providers, perhaps some other service providers and those types of things that can show that they've had a reduced ability to be able to have customers as a result of this. The loan would be able to get money into the hands, and it would only be, we would only take applications until the end of May. This isn't intended to be a long-term program. It's supposed to be a gap to be able to get people until the SBA money and other financial federal resources kind of start hitting their bank accounts. We would not ask for payment of this loan, this zero interest loan, until the beginning of 2021. And we would say that if you make payments equaling 75% of what you owe us by the end of 2021, that we would forgive the remaining 25%. So a $10,000 loan, you pay $7,500 back in 2021, then 25%, $2,500 would then be granted to you in 2022. I believe in your packet, you have the general other kind of parameters of the types of criteria that we'd be putting on it. But generally speaking, we want to make sure that they're an Arvada business, that they're in good standing, and that they have been impacted by this. And with those basic items, those are the types of businesses that we want to go after. I can pause for any questions with that. I have a couple other programs I want to talk about, but let me land there.
Very good. Ms. Miller?
I was holding off on my questions and making a list, but you may answer them in the second part, which this is why I always feel bad asking questions. But a couple things in there. Love, love, love it. You guys are right on the right track here. So my questions are there any funds for the Arvada Chamber of Commerce? And the reason I ask that is they're a 501c6 organization, so they do not qualify under the payroll protection program. They're not allowed any funds.
Right.
And also independent contractors, the Colorado Department of Labor and Employment, still, they don't have the information from the federal government because they've never given unemployment to independent contractors, and now they don't have the information to be able to create the application, so they haven't created the application, and they're on a wait, like they can't even get a PIN number right now for unemployment. And then also my third question is the Community First Foundation doing any sort of match? I noticed that they are part of the Resiliency Committee, but just checking on that as well.
So they're couple to answer your question. So in terms of the funding for this loan program, they are not part of the match. They're not part of the monies that are coming in for this loan program. In terms of the Arvada Chamber, we are allocating resources to the Arvada Chamber. There's some money that AIDA has already pledged for sponsorship of the business toolkit and some of those things. We understand what kind of gap they're under. We've been talking closely with Cami and her team of understanding how we can support them in this time. There is an item on the AIDA board meeting agenda tomorrow to consider some AIDA program funds in order to help support the chamber. And I believe that Mark, under his authority, is also considering some funding for the chamber. Mark, do you want to talk to that?
Yes, we are. We are considering somewhere in the vicinity of about $70,000 to assist the chamber. They've been a great partner. They've jumped right in, as you pointed out, Councilmember Miller, with the assistance to Arvada businesses. And so we are looking at allocating. They're part of our, we're kind of calling that our community partners, if you will, category. And they're included, penciled in for about a $70,000 amount at this point.
Thank you so much. And just for the public that are viewing, the chamber is open to every business in Arvada right now, not just a membership organization. So they are helping every single business in the city. And I applaud that.
That's an excellent point. Sorry, Mary.
Mr. Marriott?
Yeah, thank you. So I'm going to start my comments just with a notation. My business is actually in Wheat Ridge, not Arvada. So as I enter into discussions about these programs, I will not be taking advantage of any of these because I'm not in the city of Arvada. So because of that, I will be able to take part in these discussions. And I wholeheartedly support this, particularly this short-term loan program. My business is one of the ones that's been very dramatically impacted by the shutdown of our economy. And the federal response, while I think it's going to be quick for federal response, is still excruciatingly slow. And having the city step in and kind of fill that gap, be nimble where we can, I think is completely appropriate and the right thing to do. And I'd like to point out that this is a loan program. And while parts of these loans may be forgiven, and yes, parts of them may end up not being good loans, as some businesses don't make it. I think the positive effect of this far outweighs any risk that it brings. And I want to compliment AIDA and Aura and the city of Arvada for bringing forth a program like this and for figuring out how to do it. The city government is going to suffer greatly under these economic times, and there will be significant changes in our spending by our municipality in the future. But there's time for that down the road. For these businesses now, the time is now. They may be totally viable businesses that will make it if they can be bridged forward, and I think this does that. So I want to thank everybody involved for bringing it forward, and I'm fully in support of it.
Good. Mr. Jones.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I just want to echo a little bit of what Mr. Marriott said in the sense that I'm fully in support of this as well. And my business, while it's in Arvada, wouldn't qualify for many reasons. One, we have more than 50 employees, but you know, and that's kind of what I was getting to, you know, a few minutes ago when I was speaking to kind of the workshops and what kinds of things ought we be talking about in those workshops with regard to getting our businesses, you know, I like the way that Mr. Strzelski said this, the holistic approach on sources of information that are reliable. Because right now everybody's head spinning around the CARES Act and how do I qualify? What do I, you know, what does it mean to me? But unfortunately, I'm hearing or seeing, I should say, reading a lot of things from people who are trusted sources because of their titles, namely politicians, that really don't understand it either. But yet they're making comments on it that are leading people down paths that probably they shouldn't be leading them down. So I really like the fact that what that group has done today, and I think that we need to do our very best to point businesses that contact us back to the chamber and back to AIDA and back to those trusted sources, because I think that that's how we can help the businesses in Arvada. You know, I think that AIDA and Aurora and Urban Renewal, you know, and the city putting up money, this $2 million, I think is a great thing and something that we should do. I was going to mention this towards the end or during my comments, my council member comments, but I would like to figure out how I could donate my salary from the city to this effort as well. I think that you know, it's an important enough conversation that there are lots of businesses and CEOs of companies, me being one, who have taken significant pay cuts to save people's jobs. And so this is just as important to me in saving businesses. And so I don't know how I would do that or what that looks like, but I would like to, you know, forego any council salary for the remainder of the year towards this effort. So city attorney may have something to say about that, but I think that it's an important thing that I do to help give back to those businesses who are struggling every single day. So I'll reserve my other comments towards the end.
Very good. Very generous offer, and I'm sure there's a way that you can do that. And if others wish to do that, they can. Ms. Simpson?
Thank you, Mr. Strzelski. I just wanted to ask if there were I had a couple of questions. I wanted to ask first if the loans are going to be determined and awarded on a needs basis or on sort of a first come, first serve. And then my second question was going to be on the guidelines for the loans. Are there going to be some kind of guidelines such as to be used for payroll or restocking restaurant supplies before reopening, et cetera? Or is it just based on whatever a business owner feels that they need? And before you answer, I just again want to echo all of the applause for the hard work being done on this. These are important measures that I wholly support being done.
Great, thank you. So the criteria, the first answer to your question is it is first come, first serve. And because time is of the essence, we could ask for profit and loss statements, we could ask for a whole bunch of paperwork that, number one, would be from an administrative standpoint to pour over those things, figure out winners and losers, have a time period where you get enough applications in so that you can look at them all at once, create a scoring system or whatnot, is all time that we're losing. What we're trying to do is we're trying to create the criteria so that it is narrow enough so that it reaches the businesses that need it the most. And so, you know, we have less than 50 employees. we have that your business can show a demonstrated impact through loss of revenue or hours of operations of those types of things. So certainly bars and restaurants can clearly show those types of things. We do have a limited amount of money to be able to do it. And then not all businesses have the same type of need. So depending on what situations you've been able to work out with your landlord, with your inventory, if you have inventory, those types of things. If you've been able to furlough your employees, know that they can get back, but they can go on unemployment and those types of things. All these circumstances are a little bit different. And so because time is of the essence, we are really trying to make it a timing issue, and that's why we feel first come, first serve is better. And we do have that criteria that kind of shows there. And so what we've outlined is that it should be done things related to business expenses. So rent, payroll, inventory, utilities, those types of things that keep you in business in order to be able to bridge the gap until this other money is able to support you long term.
Excellent. Thank you.
Mr. Pfeiffer?
Just one clarification, Ryan. Are you going to go through more of your presentation, or are you at the end? I know we.
I've got two more programs that I just want to make sure that council is aware of, but they don't necessarily require any council direction on. This is the most one that requires council direction.
Okay, I'll save my comments till you're done through the other two.
Okay.
Ms. Miller? Hang on.
I just had one last point that didn't get answered because we went from one to the, and that's independent contractors. I would just like to advocate for them because they don't even have an application they can fill out right now for funding.
Right. This program is not geared towards those individuals. I understand that there is that need in the community for sure. Hopefully that some of these businesses that are supported can continue on. I mean, the term independent contractor, I know that you're one, is also kind of looking at how are we keeping those businesses in business so that they can keep working with those independent contractors in order to kind of keep that money flowing through as well. But this is not a program that is specifically targeted towards independent contractors.
Ryan, let me certainly echo what everyone's saying, and I appreciate what you all are doing in this regard. It's always been my message that the city is in partnership with the business community, and this is a time where we as the city need to step up to be the good partner to our business partners in terms of assisting them. My concern a little bit is that if each applicant applies for $10,000, that's going to get us to 200 businesses. I'm sort of viewing this like the run on the bank in It's a Wonderful Life, where you've got him up there saying, can you just take what you need? So is it going to be possible to be doing less than $10,000 for some businesses so that it gets them closer to the finish line in terms of getting their money from the federal government, but lets us stretch out that $2 million to more businesses?
Absolutely. So the way that the criteria is written, it's up to $10,000, and so there is certainly that ability. It's not you need to take this full amount, and we will coach people and we will ask people, hey, we want this to go as far as possible. We want to make enough, have the program large enough so that it can impact as many businesses as possible. But we also know that we have limitations within the city and all the other entities to be able to supply this money as a loan. And so it's the largest number that we felt that we could provide.
Okay, I don't see any other questions at this point. If you want to go ahead and get the rest of your presentation done.
Sure. So there's two more programs that I just want you to be aware of. This is not the only one. The second program is similar, but it is not being done through the city. So AIDA has a loan program now with the Colorado Enterprise Fund. And that's a program that we put in place going back to 2012, I want to say. And that has some money that's in it that we are going to put a little bit more money into through the remaining parts of AIDA's reserves and bolster it up a little bit and be able to get, and then CEF is going to match it with a little bit of their lending funds, and they're going to be offering a loan that you can close in 10 days. It is going to have an interest rate. I believe that right now the interest rate is 5%, but we're doing some more negotiations and we might get that down to as low as 3.5%. So we're still figuring that out. And then that is something that businesses will be able to get up to $25,000. So it's kind of that next level of if $10,000 isn't going to be enough to fill the gap, and there might be some larger restaurants or some other organizations that need a little bit more that we wouldn't be able to handle solely alone in our program. We have that next layer of a loan program that will also help. And I believe those loan payments are deferred for 6 months while things go back to normal and customers are able to come back. And so that's a secondary program that we are also being able to offer to our business communities. And then lastly, one of the other things that the finance department is able to do, and frankly, the utilities department as well, and Brian's on the call if you have any specific questions, but it's being able to defer sales tax payments for up to 12 months, and so without penalties and interest. So if a business contacts us and say, hey, we're just having a hard time, we'd like to not pay March's sales tax for a period of time, let us know and we can work with you and we can put it on a payment plan, have those deferred for a period of time, not accrue penalties and interest. And the same thing also goes for utility payments. And so if you have your water bill or your stormwater and sewer, those can also be deferred. And frankly, that is something that applies not only to businesses, but it also applies to all residents as well. So we think that holistically within what we're trying to do for the chamber and all those organizations, we're trying to create an environment where the businesses have a place to have the trusted resources to get the information that they need. We are working on the regulatory environment for them to make the real estate go back to where it can serve whatever this new normal is for the commercial environment. Then we have the loan program that we're looking through the city. We have CEF, that Colorado Enterprise Fund, which is an additional loan program. And we have the sales and use tax deferment that we're working on in order to create a bunch of different channels and a bunch of different avenues to support businesses. So those are the programs I wanted to talk about.
Very good. Okay, questions, follow up, Mr. Pfeiffer?
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Ryan, and your team for doing such a great job, and all our other partners. Quick question around the micro loan. It says $2 million, $500,000 from AIDA, $1 million from urban renewal, and then $1 million from Arvada, right? So it's 2.5 million.
Well, those are ranges, and we are still in conversation with different entities. So the AIDA board meeting is tomorrow. The ORA board meeting is on Wednesday. And so what we talked to all the entities, and we believe we can get to $2 million amongst ourselves, but how that actually shakes out is still, we need the support and the conversation between all those different entities.
Okay. So just a few comments. I mean, great job pulling this together, getting this in front of us and doing something about it at a local level. I think local governments have the most impact to both our citizens as well as our small businesses and businesses. And so I appreciate everyone's work in getting this done, and I absolutely unwavering support of what you've done here. So, you know, I've seen similar things like this in the past, and it always amazes me how quick and agile these teams are when they pull things together for our small businesses. So I I I just can't say enough of how impressed I am. So I would like for us to definitely support this. I think this is something we need to act on sooner than later. I know this is just a workshop, but Ryan, what do you need from us to get this rolling faster? Because I don't think we can wait until our next business meeting.
So I appreciate that question. Mark, do you want to answer or?
Yeah, yes, I think this would be kind of my time to step in if it's okay. We wanted to bring this to your attention tonight and see if you were supportive, which we get the sense you are. We still have a number of details to work out, what the application process is exactly going to look like, the actual loan agreements and those kinds of things. We'd like to roll this out as soon as this coming Friday. It's going to be an aggressive deadline. We have a lot of work to do between now and then. And if we have your support to keep it within the framework that we've described here tonight, we'd like to go ahead and jump on this and get it going. And you know, what we'd like to do is really have you kind of leave the details up to us at this point. We'll keep you informed as to how we're processing it, and we'll certainly make it very apparent that this is a program that's been endorsed by the Arvada City Council, so that people understand that it has the support from the top, and then we'll just get it rolled out and implemented as soon as possible, you know, early next week, with our ability to stay within the guardrails and the parameters that Ryan's described tonight, if that works for the city council.
So further the question, if you don't mind, Mayor, do we need to like give you a commitment of dollars? You have ranges here. I'm not sure, you know, do you need to have any dollar amounts discussed tonight? And
We
some
would,
assurance around that?
we would, I think, be very pleased if we had the council's commitment for a $2 million funding, you know, financial plan, and however that ends up coming about, whether it's a $500,000 each from AIDA and ORIP and $1 million from the city, or however that comes about. But if we can get a commitment for that $2 million, I believe we can make this program work. If we need something more than that for any reason, then that's when we would come back to the city council.
Okay, and would that also include any support to the chamber as well, as Mayor Pro Tem Miller said?
Yes, well, the support to the chamber wouldn't come out of this pot of money. We're working on a separate pot of money that would account for the needs of the Chamber of Commerce, and you know, perhaps other partners like the community table. No one's approached this from the community table, but just in case, we've gotten a whole additional allocation of CDBG funds through the CARES Act. So you know, we're forecasting that some of our nonprofit partners might need some assistance. And then I've already discussed with the city council the potential need for the Arvada Center. They are working very hard to solve their own issues. They're actually in the process of completing an application for the federal stimulus money that meets nonprofit needs. But we anticipate that they might have a short-term gap that we might need to fill. Again, we would come back to the city council and discuss that further. The immediate need are these small businesses, and if we can get your support tonight, we will move forward as fast as we can to get the details done, and stay within those guardrails of that $2 million allocation.
Okay,
Rachel, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say my last comment for Councilmember Jones. You can do your chow for champions, because that's as much as you get in your paycheck. So that would at least pay for one meal to some first responders and help support a local business.
Yep, I'm doing that as well.
I'm doing it too. So I'm glad. I encourage everybody to.
Very good. For Ms. Morris, doesn't the city manager basically have the authority under the emergency ordinance to go ahead and get moving on this program? No further city council formal action is necessary, right?
That's correct. The city manager has the ability under the emergency declaration to make appropriations related to the emergency, which this would be. So it's just a matter of us getting all the documentation, the loan documents, forms, things like that into place.
Very good. Is anyone else from council need to chime in terms of support? Sounds like we've got good, strong belief this is the right way to go, and let's move forward. Very good. Mr. Devon, you've got your marching orders.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Council.
Okay, anything else under this workshop item?
No, sir.
Okay, then we will move on to, we do not have anybody signed up for public comment. So we'll close that. And so that next, I'll turn it over to reports from City Council. Ms. Miller, you're first.
Your Honor, I just wanted to give a huge shout out to the Arvada Chamber and all the partners that have working on the resilience campaigns. I know the Chamber is doing some great work, and as are all the partners, but I want to give a huge shout out to Cami Welch, because in the world of Chamber of Commerce execs, she is risen to the top, I would say top 3 in the nation of most respected chamber executives for all the work she has done with the partners during this time. So kudos to Arvada. We're very proud to have her. And the only other thing I would ask is there any possibility, a way, Mr. Devon, that we could do something in your creative minds and your resilience and all the very cool work you're doing for the business community? There are a lot of people that are out of jobs right now and that don't have the funds to pay their rent. And I know that opening conversations with landlords to push that rent down, that just means they're going to have to pay more later and get into even more trouble. When I think about my stepson and his $1,200 he's getting from the federal government, as is one of his roommates, three 25-year-olds that live in a house, the rent is $2,500 a month. 2 of them get the $1,200, the third one doesn't. And that doesn't even cover 1 month's rent, and they're out of work. So if there's anything that we can do for the community at large, in addition to what we're doing for the business community, I would advocate wholeheartedly for that. Thank you. And thank you for your leadership during this time. Really great work by all of the team. Appreciate you.
Mr.
We will look into that, Mayor Pro Tem.
Mr. Jones.
Thank you. Yeah, I too want to thank Mr. Devon and your team. What a horrible time for everybody, and I know that the city team has been working tirelessly on so many fronts to ensure that all the services to the residents are being provided, and so on and so forth. So and our police department, putting themselves out there every single day in harm's way, in a different way, which is crazy. And I hope that the city team really truly understands. I think probably all of us feel the same way. Our gratitude for them doing and being where they are every single day. But I wanted to personalize this just a little bit more, in the sense that, it is, this is an unfortunate and incredible time that I don't think anybody has ever seen or experienced something like this. We've all been through downturns. We've been through, depressions. We've been through our own, business challenges that we have. But, if you would have asked me 60 days ago, if this was going to impact my business, knowing that I have a business in China that was impacted by it, I would have said no. And I don't know if it's that I'm just so naive, or if I'm just so out of touch with really the reality of the severity of this crisis. Never in a million years did I think that the federal government or our state government would put a shelter in place for something like this. Never in a million years would I think that, my personal business, we had a phenomenal year last year. We've had a phenomenal January and February, that I would be having the conversations with my executive team about people's lives, because ultimately it's people and the people that work for me whose lives are being impacted by this, no fault of their own. And if you can hear my dog barking in the background, I apologize. The joys of working from home. But I know that so many businesses are facing the same kinds of questions that I'm facing on a daily basis. And just to be completely open and honest, I've spent the last 35 days trying to figure out how to save jobs at Founcio, and trying to figure out how to keep those families that work for me impacted least as I'm not going to say this the right way, but as little as possible. And so, that's why I offer up, because again, I think that what Ryan talked about in some of these plans and the money that's being offered to our small businesses will greatly benefit them. The challenge is that, there's a lot of small businesses. I mean, over 600,000 small businesses in the state of Colorado, and most of those have, the majority of those have less than 500 employees. So they, that's really where over 1 million jobs are today. But my business, I can't benefit from this thing that's being offered up by the city. I can't benefit from the CARES Act at a national level because of the size of my company. And so there's a lot of really big companies in the city of Arvada that are struggling as well, that don't have access to some of the same things that the smaller businesses are. And I hope that we don't lose focus on them. Not that we can help them, but recognize that large companies are being forced to lay off employees, which is devastating. And again, so getting back to personalizing this to my own business, my executive team, we made the decision to take personal cuts before we made people cuts, and we're taking that on a staged, in a staged look, and we'll take more as we need to take more to try and save those jobs. And so again, the small little salary that I get from the city of Arvada doesn't account for much, but it might help in the effort to help a smaller business make it through this particular period of time. And so that's why I offer that up. I don't offer it up for any other reason than to really give back to the city in another way, because it really is about people, and it's really about business. And the sooner we can get business back online, the better we'll all be. Our particular industry that we work in, I just read an article from a trusted source. The automotive industry is down 83% over last year. We're going to feel that in the city of Arvada. While we don't probably get as much as the county in license fees and things like that, we're going to feel that, and there's going to come a point in time where some hard decisions are going to have to be made from the city manager's office about where do we cut and how much do we cut and what do those cuts look like. And so I think it's foolish of us to think that, oh, this is all going to be solved by the CARES Act, and the cities are going to be able to recoup all the money that they've spent. And we're going to be okay. We've got enough in reserve to do that. I think the city, and again, I applaud Mr. Devon and your team in making sure that we have done the right things. But I think we also, and I'm assuming that you're already looking at the future and looking at some of those hard decisions that you may have to bring to council on programs and the like. So again, I'll get off my soapbox, but my heart goes out to every single person in our city and in our state and in our nation who's been impacted by this in one way, shape, or another. But I think all of us have been impacted by it, and this will be something that we remember for generations to come. But I just hope that we don't lose sight, at least in the near term, of the people and the businesses, and doing all that we can to help support them with resources as Mr. Szczechelski laid out. Again, I appreciate the work that has been done to this point to find or to look to find $2 million to help those small businesses, and again, however we can pull together to make sure that as council members, we're doing our part to support, you know, those who elected us to be here. And so again, I appreciate the floor for just a moment, but the thing that I keep telling my employees is that while this is hard, you know, Sancio, we'll be okay. We'll make it through. There might be a lot of change in the meantime, but at the end of the day, we have to continue to provide superior service to our employees and to our customers, much like Mr. Devon is faced with today. So I'll just say it one more time. Thank you, Mr. Devon, and to every person on your team for digging in a little deeper each and every day to do the things that our citizens expect. So thank you.
Ms. Ford?
Well, first of all, I'd like to say that I definitely am thinking about all the businesses. There's no question that businesses are taking the hit. This is why it is very risky to be in business in the first place. And my heart goes out to them. And especially now, I'd like to say that, you know, we are losing people in the arts. We are losing people's lives. And these are artists who make a difference in our lives every day when we listen to music, when we look forward to those pieces of music that give us great solace at different times of our lives. And I wanted to commend our first class center, our Arvada Center here, because we have a program, a dance program of over 750 students in this city. And the Arvada Center has acted very quickly to bring a lot of these classes online so that people can continue to take classes and enjoy them as much as possible. But there is no question that this nonprofit is hurting like other nonprofits. And in these difficult times where money is being squeezed and where many organizations are asking for money and help to get them through, I want to just remind Arvada that we do have this first class organization here in our own city that provides a great benefit to its citizens who partake of it. And just remember that there are a lot of individual artists that are out of work right now, and some who are actually losing their lives. So I think we have to be thankful that we have our health. And we have to be thankful for the men and women that are acting every day in these medical emergencies, risking their own lives for our benefit. Yes, we do appreciate as well our city services and the work that our great employees are doing here in Arvada. And I want to thank them as well. And I just appreciate the citizens who are taking this health crisis seriously, realizing that everything that we do has an impact on others. So I want to thank Arvada for working together, continuing to work together.
Thank you.
Thank
Ms. Simpson?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't want to take this on too long. I want to echo the sentiments of my fellow council members, Councilmember Miller and Jones and Ford. In particular, I also want to applaud our city manager, Mr. Devon, and his entire team who are working tirelessly. I know that they are probably losing as much sleep as most, and this is a hard time. So thank you for everything you guys are doing. Our first responders, our police, our fire, and in particular, our healthcare workers who are putting themselves on the line every day, our doctors, our nurses, etc. Thank you guys for everything that you do in this crisis. It means so much to all of us. And finally, I just want to remind the citizens still watching that there are resources available and more are coming. Ryan mentioned earlier that the city can assist with utility payments if you find yourself in a time of crisis, unable to make those payments. We're happy to work with you. Mr. Devon, if there are any other things you'd like to note at this time, I certainly invite you to do so. And I really strongly echo Councilmember Miller's sentiment, or Mayor Pro Tem Miller's sentiments about what we can do for our fellow residents as this crisis moves forward.
Mr. Pfeiffer.
My screen is changing colors, so I'm changing colors too. So bear with me.
Looking a little green there, Mr. Pfeiffer.
Well, then it turns blue, and just bear with me. I have about 30 minutes worth of speech, if you don't mind, Mayor. But no, I'm just kidding. Actually, I want to bring up a couple of things. One, Mr. Devon, we suspended the park ranger program right now, and I think right now would be just a kindly suggestion would be, I know our officers have bikes, I know our animal management get on the trails. This is a good opportunity for while practicing social distancing, to be ambassadors and make sure we're educating everyone on the trails. There are more people in parks and trails right now than there probably are on the roads. And that's where I don't see any engagement from the city. So maybe that's an opportunity to continue our education program around, especially if the governor tells us we're going to go another 30 days or whatever the plan is. We might want to consider thinking about how we can better engage our citizens on these trails and parks. So with that being said, I was involved with a town hall over the weekend, and one of the questions that came up, and I think it's a challenge, and I think it's also a good challenge, is around what can we maybe educate our citizens on, maybe things they can do while they're doing social distancing and staying home. A good example that I threw out was, hey, when you go on a walk, take a trash bag and pick up some trash on the trails. I mean, we have all these trails that need to be sponsored and these waterways. That's an easy thing for anyone to do. And maybe we should promote some of these. How do you, without protecting your social distancing, how do you give back to your community while you stay at home? And what are other ways you can engage and other ways you can improve your community? So maybe our community engagement, folks could maybe get some good ideas of how to stay busy, but during this time, and maybe make our community just a little bit better. The other thing I want to bring up was, obviously you've seen some news around the wedding seamstress who used to be an Old Town Arvada business. They moved over on 65th and Wadsworth. Dee Dee there's been converting from wedding dresses to masks. She did a lot of first responders and health workers. She was highlighted in the news, so that was good to see how business are reinventing themselves during this time. I kind of want to talk about the positive things that we've been doing. Also, I want to bring up a friend of mine from high school, actually works for Fox 31 and did a bid on Sunday night on a local citizen who has used his 3D printing to make face shield components for first responders and gave them all to the fire district. These are things that, these are ideas that are out there. This is how we come together as a community and really start, helping each other get through this. And that was highlighted on Fox the other night. So these are some of the very positive stories in our community. And I want us to think of all the good that's coming right now during this dark time. And then the last thing is really just for everybody, including our team and staff at the city, about working from home and isolation. We are creatures of social habits, and we want to be together all the time. And all I can encourage the teams is to continue to connect and continue to be with each other virtually during this time, and keep your sanity a little bit. It's a little difficult during this time when we're so used to shaking hands and being close to each other, and we'll get through it. So I want to end on that note, and I just want to thank all the citizens and all the businesses that are doing good things out there. I want to thank the chamber as well. I did my Chow for Champions today. It went out, and I got bluegrass in Old Town to cook up some food to donate to Lutherans, ICU, and COVID nurses for the swing shift, who has, I guess, don't always get the perks. So that's where I got to donate some money, $200, and now not only did I support a local business, but I also supported first responders or frontline folks. So these are just good things that can happen, and I just want to encourage everyone to continue doing those good things. This is a time to do that, and we need everybody to do it. So I'll leave it there. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Piper. Mr. Marriott.
Thank you. I'll be real quick. I just wanted to say again, thanks to the city. I think you guys are doing a good job under very difficult situation and also very uncharted territory. There's no page in the city manager's manual about this, I'm sure. So good job on writing the book. I also want to thank our police department. You know, I think never have they been put into more of a unique position probably than they are now. What with so much of the city shut down, some people, the folks who were committing crimes before are still committing crimes today, and so the police have to deal with that, as well as, of course, they have to deal with all the public interest in these orders that we're currently under. And to my knowledge, they have walked a very fine line there and done a very good job. I haven't heard of a single instance of Arvada officers wanting to know where someone's going or what they're doing, unlike the city of Denver right next door. So I want to commend them for doing that. And to all our residents out there, this is a really, really tough time. The difficulty with this, of course, is the effect is so asymmetrical. There are citizens who this has not affected them negatively at all. There are many more citizens who this has affected them negatively, and then there are some who this has affected them profoundly negatively. And that's a recipe for difficulty. And our residents so far have been terrific at looking after one another, taking care of their neighbors, taking care of their friends. And I think it's more of the uniqueness of Arvada that brings that out in people. And I'm glad to see it, and happy to see that. Looks to me like that will continue. So thank you.
Well, thank you all for those comments, and I'm not going to attempt to repeat them. You've all been very, I think, thoughtful and heartfelt in your comments. So I thank each of my fellow council members for your compassion and what you're talking about in terms of our citizens, certainly with regard to the city team. It's the little things that we can do in addition to the big things that we can do together. Put a teddy bear in your front window so when people are walking by, they see those. Ms. Simpson's got 2 of them. We do 2 at our house. And it's great to just see the little kiddos as they come by and their parents and grandparents. It brings a little quick moment of joy. In my neighborhood, several of my neighbors are out playing bingo every afternoon at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. They've got one person out with a bullhorn who's calling out the numbers, and they're got a great community bingo game going. And so to sort of follow up on what Mr. Marriott said, Arvada is such a unique, great place, and we're really proving it during probably the most difficult time that many of us have ever lived through. I've got to again remind our citizens to do the social distancing, to stay home if you can stay home, and limit your trips to the grocery store, limit your other activities, start wearing a mask when you're out in public. Do those things because that's the only known way to deal with this pandemic at this point in time. So please, please, please follow the guidelines on that and continue to do those things. I always talk about, and we all talk about, what a great volunteer spirit we have in our community. Well, this is the biggest volunteer effort any of us can do right now, is to volunteer to do everything within our powers to stay safe, to keep our loved ones safe, and to be able to do those things that we can within our power to make sure that we get through this with the least amount of loss of life, the least amount of loss of businesses, and the least long-term impact on all of this. So thank you all for what you're doing. Thank you to the citizens who are contributing so much in these difficult times. And with that, Mr. Devon, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Council, we really appreciate the kind wishes and expressions. Bottom line is, all of us on this team cannot do the work that we're doing without the support from all of you. And we have been very fortunate to have a city team, a leadership team, and really all of our city team working in collaboration with the city council. And so it's through your support that we're able to accomplish the things that we accomplish. So thank you very much for what you've shown tonight, and we will continue to carry on and keep you updated as we move forward on behalf of all of our community to deal with this public health emergency.
Okay, Ms. Morris.
Thank you. I'll just echo Mr. Devon's comments. Thank you for your support. We really do appreciate that. And with that, I've got nothing else.
Very good. Thank you all. Good meeting tonight. We've had our sort of baptism by fire of doing this, and I think we've proven that we can do this effectively and that we ought to continue to do this effectively over the next few weeks before we can all be back together. With that, we are adjourned. Thank you.